and David will probably join us later. Well, I'd like to welcome you to the annual NCOBPS Presidential History Roundtable Series. Thanks for your attendance, and thanks to the 4 former NCOBPS presidents who agreed to participate on this year's roundtable. I'm Sheila Harmon Martin, the NCOBPS historian. Over the past 15 years, at the request of then President Desiree Pedesglo, Dr. Shelby Lewis and I began the process of establishing the NCOBPS collection at the Archives Research Center, Robert Woodruff Library, Atlanta University Center. The collection was officially launched in 2020, and I invite you to visit it through the Archives Research Center and NCOBPS websites. Complementing the NCOBPS collection and the work of the 50th anniversary task force appointed by President Sheila, the Presidential History Series is designed to introduce new NCOBPS members, students, and colleagues to the development of our organization through the voices of its leadership. At the same time, for those of us who have been longtime members, this is another opportunity to recall through our memories the contributions of these presidential administrations. It is my honor to introduce today's roundtable participants who will discuss the political climate and issues influencing their tenure, their accomplishments and challenges, and lastly, their vision for the future of NCOBPS. Dr. Diane Pinderhughes served as the 19th president from 1988 to 1989. She earned the PhD from the University of Chicago and is a professor of political science at the University of Notre. Her publications focus on racial, ethnic, and gender politics in the Americas, U.S. civil society institution, and voting rights policies. She is the author of numerous scholarly articles and books, including her most recent Unequal Roads, an introduction to U.S. racial and ethnic politics with Louis DeCipio, Todd Shaw, and Tony Travis. Dr. Pinderhughes has also served as president of the American Political Science Association and is presently the president of the International Political Science Association. Following Dr. Hughes will be Dr. Minion, Kenneth Chauncey, Casey Morrison, who served as the 28th president from 1998 to 1999. He earned the PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is professor affiliate in the Joe Biden School of Public Policy and Administration, University of Delaware. He previously held positions at Syracuse University, the University of Missouri, and Mississippi State University. Dr. Morrison has authored 5 books and numerous articles, largely in political science journals in the research areas of U.S. and comparative politics and administration, racial politics in the Americas, and political leadership. Dr. Morrison will be followed by Dr. Coven if he makes it, and if he does, I'll introduce him again at that time. And our next president will be Dr. Desiree Selma Pedescleaux, who served as the 34th president from 2007 to 2009. She earned the PhD from Yale University. A member of the Spelman College faculty since 1991, she serves as Academic Dean of Undergraduate Studies and Associate Professor of Undergraduate Studies and Associate Professor of Political Science. Among her publications, The Color of School Reform, co-authored with Jeffrey Hennig, Richard Hula, and Marion Orr, received the Best Book Award in Urban Politics from the American Political Science Association. It is my honor to present to you today's Presidential History Series Roundtable. Dr. Pinderhughes.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Sheila. Should I make myself the speaker? I'll hit speaker, or somebody's already done that. Okay. So I looked at a few notes for this, and we'll give you some context for understanding how I came to be president. I was a member of the Executive Council for many years, from 1977 to 85. I was treasurer from 1980 to 87. And I watched the unfolding of many meetings and some of the difficulties the organization had. Some of them included things that we're still struggling with. The role of having an executive director, for example. It was during those years that we first created the role of executive director with Lois Hollis, the late Lois Hollis of Albany State, who served for 2 terms as executive director. And following Lois, our current executive director, Kathy Strohmile Golden, who's been executive director ever since. The leadership, various presidents, Sheila Nunnally, Todd Shaw, and the current president, Tiffany Willoughby Herard, have been working on fundraising, developing an endowment. There's a Council of Presidents has participated in that, a funding organization. There's now a more formalized structure for the fundraising campaign that is in the process of development. But those kinds of things started, we were working with those issues. Those issues were on the table in the 80s. And I watched that develop and knew that we needed to have an executive director. As treasurer, I strongly supported that and thought it was something that had to occur, because we couldn't just do it out of the back pockets of the combination of the local arrangements committee and the presidents of the officers. So as Sheila has already noted, I was president from 1988 to 89. My predecessor was the late Michael Combs, who we lost a year or 2 years ago now. Paula McLean was my successor. In addition to the executive director role, when I was treasurer, we were talking about and began to move forward in the creation of the National Political Science Review, with Lucius Barker being the first editor. So when I became president, I looked at these challenges as a member of the council, as the treasurer for some time. And one of the things I did was to create a 20th anniversary commission. It was the 20th anniversary of NCOBPS founding. And I asked the late William Nelson, otherwise known as Nick, of the Ohio State University to chair that commission. Looking at having been on the council, having been treasurer, gave me a perspective on how quickly, for example, your presidential term went by. That year was quick. So one of the things I proposed when I asked Nick to chair that commission was to create a 2-year term for president-elect and president. That was incorporated into the association's framework. And so I should have listened more carefully as Sheila introduced people, but I think maybe, well, she didn't introduce David Coven. He might have been a 2-year president. I'm not sure.
Marvin Hare was the first.
Okay. And then Desiree.
David was the second.
Okay, and so Desiree 2007 and 2009 is an example of one of those. I think there's some challenges to it because of course you never quite remember when the term begins and when it ends, but at the same time it gives that person time to become familiar with the roles and the activities and take some control. So I would say that was one of the probably one of the more important things that was done. I know that somewhere that 20th anniversary commission's report exists. I'm sure I have a copy of it, but it's so long ago that it's not in my current computer. So I'll have to work at finding a copy. Sheila, do you have a copy?
I'll double check, Diane, because I may have submitted a copy. I'll double check to the archives because I did receive a lot of information from different members. So I'll put a note to make sure.
I do have a copy of it, Diane.
Oh,
wonderful.
Well.
And in fact, I'm going to say a bit about it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
But I'll get it to you if you.
Yeah, no, I'd love to have a copy too.
And also give it to me too, just in case I didn't send it in, but.
Sure.
I think that another comment I want to make, well, let me say this about the 2-year term. I think that, well, other organizations have begun to do that. The International Political Science Association has a different model than the APSA or NCOBPS in that it was an organization that met every 3 years. So the presidents were elected for 3 years. That changed about 2012. And they went to a 2-year term as president, and they meet every 2 years now. So in a sense, IPSA was already, a longer term role for president. It's become a more, because of that 2-year change from 3 to 2, it's become more structured. They created a secretariat based in Montreal in 2000. And there's an executive director. They used to be called the Secretary General after the UN. APSA has moved from having a 1-year term. Now the person is president for 1 year, but they're president-elect, which was a long-term structure. But now there's a president emeritus. That is, you serve, and then you serve for another year after that as more intensely involved with the organization, with the council. I think you need that longer term engagement so that there's some transition and so people know what they're supposed to do, A, and B, you can continue the policies that you began as president-elect or as president and then following up afterwards. So it's an important shift, I think, for all of these types of organizations. Another element that changed over the years was the council, in which you were elected the council after, not just after my presidency, but I know that this began to change the council function so that all former presidents were de facto members of the council. Of course, more recently, as the years went by, there are just too many presidents so that for everyone to be on the council or even to be expected to attend. So a council of presidents was created. I think Sheila or Elsie really created that council of presidents. That's kind of fallen off, but I think with the development efforts that Elsie and Todd Shaw have been working on. That's one of the things that was been done. How much time do I have? I didn't.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Well, it's just 12. We started at 12:15. I'm not sure David is going to make it, so I'll give you, I should have been watching the time. I was too busy listening. So you can have about 1 more minute.
Oh, okay. So I'll just.
We have till 12, I mean, till 1:30, right?
45.
Corey, 1:45. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're fine.
So I would say, to follow up, I would say that there were tensions that were going on before I became president, during my presidency and afterwards. The fundraising I already mentioned. I would say, looking to see who's here. I think that the HBCU versus predominantly white institutions has been an ongoing tension in NCOBPS's life and history. I was happy to be president and also wanted to address the ways in which NCOBPS's founding, of course, incorporates its role as having been being born at Southern and Atlanta University. But this issue is an ongoing issue. And one of the things that's interesting in the video, in which Wendy Smoot comments specifically about NCOBPS's origins in HBCUs, but that now many more students, many more faculty are at predominantly white institutions, and that NCOBPS needs to address that issue. She talks about that explicitly. So I wanted to put that on the table as well, and know that it was some of the, one of the issues that in question. Another is gender issues. And that's, I would say that shifted dramatically over the years. The creation of the Association of Women who are Black in Political Science, that organization was created as a subgroup of NCOBPS. I think in the earliest decades, a number of us had to deal with inappropriate commentary and approaches from our male colleagues, older male colleagues. And I remember one meeting in particular in which I spoke very sharply to a long-term colleague who's now passed away, so I won't comment about that. You can ask me in person about how his behavior was inappropriate, and it really did need to stop. I think the way in which women have functioned in the organization has changed. Both the leadership issues, the how do you respond to people who feel that it's appropriate for them to engage in encouragement, sexual harassment, but what we now call sexual harassment. And that needed to change. There wasn't so much a formal element of it, but I think the norms within the association have changed. The younger generations have a very different attitude. So it'll be interesting to hear other people's comments on that. So I think that's enough for now. Of course, there's more to talk about with NCOBPS, but you know.
And there's now an official sexual harassment policy too. Right. Okay, thank you. Dr. Morrison?
Thank you. I brought some notes, which I will share with you just to try to keep myself on time here. I assume, Sheila, I have about 15 minutes.
Yes.
Yes. First of all, I want to, are you all seeing my screen? The slides. I want to thank Sheila for persisting in organizing this panel every year so that we have some cumulative sense of what has happened in NCOBPS and how we have worked through it. I was president at the 30th anniversary of the organization, and that year we went back to the founding site, which was at Baton Rouge in 1999, and the theme we selected that year was 30 Years in Search of the Key to African Unity. And that was hearkening back to this notion that I projected here on the screen, that NCOBPS's major goal was to establish a new Black politics for Africans wherever they were. And I, as a comparative political scientist, that was my first field of interest, was continental Africa. That had a very great appeal to me. And so that was the theme we operated on. As for what was going on in the political climate at the time, I think it's important to look at this because it explains that as things change in the USA, the more they remain the same. In reference to race relations, you will recall that a Democratic government was in power. Bill Clinton had come to office 1993 to 2000, had been dubbed by a generally clear seer like Toni Morrison as the Black president, as it were. And very quickly, we came to understand the extent to which this individual for whom we had voted on the promise that he would respond to the welfare interests of the African American community came up short right out the door. Lonnie Guinier, who recently passed away, had been nominated for a high executive post in the Justice Department, and the right wing came out against her, dubbing her as the quota queen, because she dared to articulate a theory about the possibilities of a real democracy. And Bill Clinton caved in and withdrew her nomination. That was the signal that not a great deal had changed for us, and that the challenge for us in building a new Black politics in NCOBPS was going to be what it had always been. It only got worse in the Clinton administration when he developed a so-called welfare reform program, the content of which was to obliterate, quote, welfare as we know it. And we all know what that meant and the consequences it had for struggling African-American communities all across the country. And then in the midterm elections in the legislature, the Democratic Party got clobbered and the so-called moderate hand of Bill Clinton was actually tied, and the rest was history. So I set 3 goals for my 1-year appointment. Diane has already talked about the challenges of that. And so the first sort of theme was organizational structure. The second was communications, and the third was financial growth and development. And I'll talk a little bit about what these 3 goals meant to me and the cadre of people in NCOBPS. We were small, but everybody put in, and in every administration, and they did that for mine as well. So I had read that report that Diane had, the task force report that Nick Nelson had done at Diane's direction in 1992, I think it was. And one of the things that came out of that report was this discussion about the 1-year term of the NCOBPS president, that by the time you even began to think about something you wanted to implement, the term was over. Because after all, the 1-year term consisted of the meeting where you were elected, an interim meeting in the fall at the APSA, and really that constituted your term. And so I appointed another group to look at that specific aspect of that task force report, and Jerry Jackson chaired it, and brought a proposal to the council that was approved to give us the 2-year term that we have now. And I remember at our business meeting, Mac Jones, who didn't make many false moves, actually suggested to me that I should be the first person to assume the 2-year term. Well, I've already told you that I'm a comparativist, so the political regimes that I study are filled up with executives who changed the rules in the middle of their governance and try to stay forever. And so I declined that opportunity. And actually, Sheila, my memory suggested that it was Joe McCormick who actually served the first 2-year term. I don't know. It was he who followed me, at least. Anyway, so that was the first goal. The second goal was this polyglot of things about communication. First one was the membership conundrum that I think every president of NCOBPS has had from the beginning. How do we sustain a membership and a paying membership that helps the organization to survive and thrive? Every president has had this membership problem. By the time I came along, electronic communications had arrived. We were using email and listservs. And it may surprise some of the younger people in the audience that at that time we had a newsletter that was going out to 600 people. Well, during the year that I served, we didn't resolve this, but we spent a lot of time talking about it. We worked at it. The other piece of this communication was we tried to find the means for liaising with other professional caucuses. There was one in sociology, the psychologists were organized, and that was fraught from the beginning with all kinds of problems, logistical problems. It wasn't for lack of interest or commitment to a sort of notion of Pan-African unity on the part of these organizations. There were just all kinds of logistical problems in having caucus organizations that met at different times and so on to get to meet. But what happened here was the African Studies Association, essentially a European white organization studying Africa, fell apart. And out of that emerged the African Heritage Studies Association. A number of NCOBPS members were involved in that. Shelby Lewis has continued to be involved in that. And we actually had 2 or 3 joint meetings with the African Heritage Studies Association. So we worked at that. The other thing we worked at was establishing a kind of public face for NCOBPS, where we put a public policy agenda together reflecting this new Black politics that we were trying to develop, projecting ourselves to the public. Howard University, Lorenzo Morris was involved in this, tried to put on a number of public fora about important problems that we were pushing. And I like to think that this idea has really come into its own with the development of science and technology now that gives us the capacity we have with social media to organize events in the way that we are doing, I think, wonderfully well today. Then the third part of this communications goal had to do with the enduring Pan-African imagination that this organization has always had. That we were an organization not just for Blacks in the USA, but for those in continental Africa and the rest of the Americas where African descendants are concentrated. I was at the time president of the US branch of the African Association of Political Science, which had been developed in 1973, I think it was. And we sought to deepen these communications by sending delegations to the biannual meetings of APPS. Lorenzo Morrison and I went to meeting in Dakar. George Zangola and I went to meeting in Cameroons, and George was always a part of the executive leadership of the Continental organization. And we brought to a couple of meetings, Shelby helped a lot with this, the leadership of APPS to NCOBPS meetings. The third theme was financial growth and management. Diane has already mentioned about the fundraising aspect that's going on now, but actually it was in that 30th year that we established something called the Campaign for the New Millennium and set a goal for raising $50,000. And Kathy is here, will confirm that we just about got there. And the aim of this was to sustain an independent NCOBPS future, so that we would have the wherewithal to pay for those ideas that we were committed to. And I like to think that the idea that Sheila Nonley and Todd Shaw have been following on now in our major campaign, capital campaign, harkens back to that to some extent. So those were the things we worked on. Finally, NCOBPS and the future, I pitched this very broadly. The first point is I'm not worried about NCOBPS. I think we have a cadre of young professionals, and now they have integrity to the ideological commitments that we started with. They're engaged in sustained scholarship centering on race as a variable. And that kind of clarity didn't exist when we started to work. And I think we're clear about that now. And I think we're going to be okay. We just have to recognize that we live in a world, a racialized world that's essentially the same. And we've got to be vigilant, we've got to be active. And the piece of that I think none of us thought we would countenance in our lifetime is the fragility of the US democracy, a thing that's always been flawed, but now is at the risk of absolutely disappearing. And so that leaves us with both hope and despair. And when we mingle hope and despair together, what we come out with as Black people is the emergence every day with sufficient energy to breathe, to be able to fight for the next day in a world like this that we live in. I'll stop there. I've probably gone over my time anyhow.
Well done.
Hold on one second. Okay, hold on one second. I have Dr. Covin on the phone, but while I speak to him, I'm gonna let Desiree go ahead and then we'll see if we can bring him in shortly. Okay, I'm back.
Good afternoon. I am so pleased to be with you today. Wish that I could be in person with you somewhere, not in Baltimore, but someplace else. I'm Desiree Pedesglo. I served as president from 2007 to 2009. So I was the beneficiary of the work done by Diane Pinderhughes and her administration and those following, because I did serve for 2 years. Like Diane, I served as treasurer of the organization and served on the executive council. I began my tenure with NCOBPS as an undergraduate, being taken to NCOBPS meetings by Jewel Prestige in a car with her listening to country music, going from Baton Rouge to Houston or Mississippi. And so it was quite an adventure. And so I'm still with NCOBPS. I'm grateful for the organization, and certainly grateful to have served as president of this great organization. During my time as president, or at least when I came to the presidency, we were feeling very optimistic. In 2007, Hillary Clinton announced that she was running for president. Shortly thereafter, Barack Obama announced that he was running for president. In 2008, President Obama became president. Barack Obama became president, followed by what some have called the Great Recession in 2008. And I think on top of all of this, then I had my personal tragedy in 2007. So all of this kind of colored my time as president of the organization. In 2009, as I left the organization, we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the founding of NCOBPS. We were in Houston, I believe it was, Kathy, Houston, Texas. And the theme that year was Racial Americana, Continuities and Changes in Racial Politics. That was our theme as I left office. During my tenure as president, we held, believe it or not, the first Executive Council retreat. We met in Atlanta. There was probably meetings all along, but we had a formal retreat during my tenure. We met in Atlanta and discussed the future of the organization. And like Diane and like Casey and others, we discussed financial sustainability, as well as people or membership sustainability of the organization. Kathy, I want to say it was AJ Casey that led us in that discussion in Atlanta. And so, we were there for 2 or 3 days in Atlanta discussing the sustainability of the organization. And again, one of the things we discussed was a dedicated, hired executive director. Kathy was serving, but that was certainly a discussion that we had at that time. Also during that time, we, and Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, but we filed some long overdue tax returns with the help of Kathy and Katrina and others. We started getting our financial house in order during that time. And so that's one of the things that we did. And Sheila mentioned probably the one thing that I'm most proud of is that we began the talks with the Woodruff Library to establish the NCOBPS collection there in the Atlanta University Center, so that we could make sure that the legacy of NCOBPS was there to be studied and to be learned about. So we began the talks with the Woodruff Library under my administration, but it was not official until the Wendy Smoot administration. She was the one that signed the papers and everything to establish the NCOBPS collection. But it was the work of Sheila and Kathy who did the footwork, picking up historical documents that were in Houston and Virginia, picking those historical papers up and depositing them at the Woodruff Library. And I'm sounding like a broken record because I'm saying the same thing that Diane said and Casey said, but the challenges that we face in 2007 through 2009 are the same. We've had the same discussions: financial stability and membership sustainability. And so we've struggled with these two very large issues, for most of the time that I've been involved with NCOBPS. But like KC, I'm optimistic. I'm going to cite the great philosopher James Brown. I feel good about the future of NCOBPS. I went to some of those panels yesterday with the graduate students, and my heart was full, seeing them carry on. And as Casey said, we're at a better place than we were with the study of race. We're planning for the future. Diane mentioned the Council of Presidents. We have made a commitment to this organization to be here financially and otherwise. We now have an endowment committee. This organization moves slow. So, it started under Diane and others, and we're just starting to see the fruits of our labors now with the endowment committee. I think we had our first Giving Tuesday, where we raised a pot of money that has helped us in our endowment efforts. And so I think we're well on our way to sustaining this organization, where it will be stronger than it ever was. And so I feel good about this organization, and I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. I have Dr. Covin on the phone. We're trying to bring him in. Unfortunately, of course, the link that he had took him to a wrong panel, that the problem we all have. And unfortunately, I can't send the portal link from where I am.
I just sent him the main portal.
See, he said it was the same link that the other link, it was the same one. He kept, in fact, twice he did use it, but it's taken him to the wrong panel.
So Sheila, if you put your phone to the mic, we can probably hear him.
Oh, okay. David, we're gonna put your phone to the mic so you can do your report. Because I for some reason we're not able to because you haven't been able to log into the main portal, because if you could just log into the main portal under concurrent sessions, come to Saturday, and you can log in that way.
And I just sent him that.
Okay, Casey just sent that to you. He sent you the main portal.
That portal can be not so user-friendly.
I gave him precise directions, so, but that may not work as well.
Yeah, because sometimes you have to click on that Saturday. You need to click on the schedule, and then sometimes you have to click on that Saturday, that Saturday thing twice before it shows up.
Okay.
Okay.
I've also just emailed him.
So you see,
just emailed
okay, tell
him
me what you have.
A direct link. Hopefully that might expedite things a bit.
So tell him to look for the email from Corey.
Yeah, that should bring him straight in here.
Well, I'm going to say a little bit about apps while we're waiting. My predecessor for IPSA, Marianne Neuer, worked with Christopher Ezeke, a member of the Executive Council, previously Executive Committee for IPSA from South Africa, and they worked together to revive apps. So it's recreated, and Christopher is actually coming to the International Studies Association meeting in Nashville in a couple of weeks, and we've invited him to come to speak at Notre Dame. I'll try to send out an email with an invitation. I think that's going to have a Zoom link to whoever in NCOBPS would like to hear it, particularly obviously KC, because I'd like you two to interact. He's also been recently named creator or first director of a new center at his university, which is the University of Pretoria. And it's going to be a center for the study of the United States.
Wow.
A really interesting idea.
Yes.
But he'll be talking about it during his visit. So I'm going to stop now because I see Sheila's is unmuted.
Thank you so much. Dr. Covin is now with him, and I'd like to apologize to him for the problems he had this morning, but he's here. And as you know, he was the president from 2003 to 2005. But before Dr. Covin speaks, I'd like to introduce him and also clarify one point of discussion earlier. Joseph McCormick did succeed Dr. Morrison, but he served from 1999 to 2000. The president after that was Brenda Jones, but because she did not serve, her president-elect Marvin Hare became the president, and he served the beginning of the 2 terms. Okay. All right. I'm pleased to introduce to you Dr. David Coven, who served as the 32nd president from 2003 to 2005. He earned the PhD from Washington State University and is Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Sacramento State University. His research focuses, oh, is my camera off? I'm sorry. No, it's on. His research focuses on Pan-African studies, Black politics in the US, and Afro-Brazilian politics. Dr. Coven has authored 7 books and numerous book chapters and journal articles, as well as an extensive array of articles in the popular press. In addition to his numerous professional activities, Dr. Coven is a community activist who has been recognized for his contributions through numerous community service awards. I'm pleased to present to you Dr. David Coven. David, Corey, are you still managing the?
I'm still here. He is in the room.
Yeah, but okay, you still had Dr. Pinderhughes. Are you controlling the camera to highlight the speakers?
And he
It sh-
appears to be unmuted, so maybe there's something with the
Audio.
his.
David, can you hear us?
When I was speaking to him, I could hear Diane in the background.
It might need to turn up the volume on his
And if
audio.
Dr. Coven, if you can hear us, if you don't mind dropping a note in the chat.
What happened? He was on because I could hear Dr. Pinderhughes talking in the background on his computer. I don't know what happened.
There's always something with Zoom.
Mm,
Yeah, I sure hope this is our last year having a conference like this.
oh, well, anyway, while we're waiting for David to speak or whatever, I just wanted to follow up on Diane's comment about the reemergence of apps after being dormant for some time. And it looks like it is beginning to get its sea legs again, and that there is new leadership there. And I promised Tiffany that I would go through my files and try to provide her some information about the sort of past relationships, and I will do that. But it's just taking me some time in my busy retirement to get to it. But it's my hope that we will be able to establish direct links again, that we'll be able to invite the APPS president to a conference to speak, and to have some of us going out to their meetings. Actually, it's safer to travel in reference to COVID in Africa than it is here right now. But anyway, to get that relationship going again, because I think there is a willingness on both sides. And I'm intrigued by the fact that Pretoria is establishing a center for the study of the United States. You know, I was just thinking this morning when I was going over this presentation of how wonderful it might be if somebody were to provide NCOBPS some money to sponsor in Africa. This is already happening in Latin America and the Caribbean, where there are studies of the Black descendants in the USA, but there are not many places where you can get academic specialists who are working directly on the problems of the descendants of Africa in the so-called New World. And this is something that I think has explosive possibilities if we can get it going.
There's your retirement project.
I have a link that I'll send everybody that's related to this. You got to find it.
I think I noticed that David, David, are you there? Because his audio was unmuted.
I really do wonder if it may be what Kathy mentioned, that his sound is just not on his computer.
Yeah, it may be turned down.
But when I was speaking to him on my cell phone, I could hear Diane speaking in the background. So it was pretty loud because I could hear her discussion. And that's when I knew he had arrived at the right site.
Yeah, but that would have no reference to his ability to talk to us, though.
Right.
So David, if you can
No,
hear
he
us
can.
at the top of your computer on the right side, if you're using a Mac, I don't know where it is, if you're using a PC.
It would be at the bottom, probably.
Okay, so you look at either the top or the bottom and see if you can.
It's the microphone icon. It's a.
Yeah.
If this is not quite possible, or as AdvanceNet joins us, if we can, I want to make sure that he doesn't lose space to sort of provide his presentation. And so if we can use the cell phone maybe in the short term and try to figure out the
Okay,
the
let me
tech,
see if I
if you
can call him back.
call him.
Hey, David, we can see you on the screen, but we can't hear you.
Ask if he can hear us.
Can you hear? You can hear us. Yes, he can hear us.
Hmm.
Okay.
Then it's got to be something about his computer.
Now I can try to put you on my speaker and you can speak to us through my cell phone. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Uh-oh. Can you all hear him?
Yes, but he's going to have to turn off the audio on his computer,
But
just
you're gonna have to turn off the audio on your computer.
so that we don't get the
Yeah,
feedback.
turn off your speaker.
Turn down the speaker, yeah.
Okay. Now you can talk. Uh-oh.
Okay. So I'll
No,
just go ahead.
it's still,
No.
that's
The
still not.
speaker is still on.
No,
Can he can just turn the since he's talking to you on the cell phone, he can just turn his computer off and talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh,
yeah.
yeah. Why don't you turn your computer off?
Okay. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just go ahead with my statement. And what it is my
I don't know why.
NCOBPS president.
You know what? I'm sorry. We're still having this feedback. I don't know why we're.
Is this any better?
Yeah. Well,
Okay. So what I decided to do.
no, David, we still have feedback. What you know, when I called you on your phone, I had this feedback. What I don't know whether is this your house phone or is it a cell phone?
It's a house phone.
Okay. Because we're still getting it's like a lot of feedback. Why don't we just plan? Because I know you have a lot of wonderful things to say. I think I want to plan and do this again when we can definitely hear you. Because
Did he turn off his computer?
KCX, did you turn off your computer? But I don't think so. I still see him on the screen.
Yeah.
Just get out of that completely.
Yeah, they said turn off your computer completely.
David,
Or log
just-
out of the site, yeah.
yeah, just shut down your computer, David.
Yeah, I will. Is this better?
No,
Yeah.
your computer is still up, it seems like.
No.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and read my statement. And what I did was to go back to the president's message that I gave when I was president of NCOBPS in 2003, because it's a reflection of that time. I think that I made a couple changes in it. I talk about things, technical things that weren't present in 2003, but essentially this is my president's message at 2003. So it reflects what was going on in NCOBPS during my presidency. To me, NCOBPS is the world's primary political science organization. Some may find this delusional thinking. I do not. A number of factors lead me to this conclusion. I'll begin explaining how I came to this point of view by addressing a series of questions. Where could I find a gathering of political scientists I'd rather attend? Where could I find an academic conference more focused on subjects dear to my heart and mind? Where could I find exchanges more stimulating to the intellect? I've attended the meetings of all the major political science conferences in the United States, sat on their panels, presented papers at their annual gatherings, roamed the hallways before, after, and during their sessions. And I can say categorically that there are no political science meetings like NCOBPS. Ours is the premier gathering of political scientists in the world. For a grant application to the NSF, I once compiled a selected bibliography of works by NCOBPS members. That document was staggering in both its extent and its quality, primarily because of the reviewers' recognition of the importance of the work being done by NCOBPS members. The application was funded. I challenge anyone to compile a list of publications by APSA or any of its regional clones and come up with a list of publications which, proportional to its membership, is as distinguished as a list representative of NCOBPS publications. We are not like other political scientists. I quote from the NCOBPS Constitution. The purpose of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists shall be to bring Black political scientists together so as to maximize their role in the liberation of Black people. We have a mission. I come to NCOBPS meetings, virtual or in person, to enjoy them. I never hear intellectual exchanges like those at NCOBPS. Never see such sustained flashes of brilliance and hear such cutting repartee. I leave NCOBPS meetings both nourished and stimulated. I remember our late colleague, Michael Mitchell, saying to me many times after NCOBPS meetings, it's exhilarating to be in the presence of so many brilliant Black people. Indeed it is. If I'm going to choose an academic team, I'm coming to NCOBPS, not APSA. If I'm going to choose a political team, I'm coming to NCOBPS, not APSA. If I want to enjoy the company of friends, I'm coming to NCOBPS, not APSA. I am humbled and grateful to be president of this organization. We are a scholarly organization, and we have a responsibility and ability to produce landmark scholarly work and to have that work reflected in our conference and journal. We have a responsibility to bring the lessons of our scholarship into the political world, because we don't write political science like anybody else. Nobody else writes about the politics of the Black nation. Nobody else says we have no leaders. Who else would address the crisis of the Negro intellectual? We have a mission to come together to maximize our role in the liberation of Black people. It's our Constitution. It's a trust which demands the highest level of human achievement. We must do our best. We may fail, but if we do, it will not be because we have not given our all. This must be our standard, to do our best. It is derived from the tradition of our people and the tradition of NCOBPS. If we do not do our best, we do not merit office. If we do not do our best, we set no standard worth following. If we do not do our best, we have no reason to assume the trust visited upon us. If we do not do our best, we betray our own raison d'etre. But, hold on, we will do our best because we are NCOBPS. It's in our DNA. We are the premier organization of political scientists in the world. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coven. We really miss seeing you on the screen. Your words, of course, are always so reflective. And I'd like to everyone to know that that wonderful speech is a part of the NCOBPS collection. And David, while you're here, could you briefly talk about some of the wonderful things that you did while you were president? Because one, of course, that you briefly mentioned was the NSF Foundation grant. I think that was a developmental grant. You want to talk a little bit about some of your accomplishments?
I don't, you know, I'm so molded into NCOBPS, it's hard for me to separate what I did from what Casey did, from what Diane did, from what you did. It's all locked up and all joined together. So I'm reluctant to speak about what I did because everything I did was in conjunction and inspiration from my colleagues.
Thank you so much. Now, anyone want to say anything to David?
Well, I can
wanna-
separate. I'll let Casey go.
I want to follow up on that 1999 project he mentioned, because that was the year that we got that NSF funding that allowed us to go to Brazil and cement the relationships that developed into the Race and Democracy project. And David and I worked on that with Luisa Barros from Brazil. And then within a year or two, Diane Pinderhughes had worked magic with the Ford Foundation, and we had what then seemed like a ton of money that allowed us to build that big project that goes on to this day. And the accomplishments from it have been some of the most fundamental and expansive of my entire career. And it is so consistent with what David has just said about NCOBPS people giving their best, being their best. That project is a primary illustration of that.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you,
And
Morrison.
this is just to follow on, KC mentioned part of this, and even from that 1999 project to most recently, I think David was the primary writer for the APSA grant, and then Diane was able to get some funding for the, the Brazil project. And so, David has done a lot, even though he says it's tied to someone else. He's taken a lead role on some of those projects, and I just want to give him credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely correct. David wrote every word of the proposal, if truth be told. So he's being modest and self-effacing, but.
Yeah, and I remember the grant to support the executive director position. So David, NCOBPS is forever grateful that you also served as the president. I think we have a audience, and we must have been up against some tough competition today. But at this time, if anyone in the audience would like to ask any questions, Emmett, since you'll be following in another year or so.
So it's been great hearing from each of you and definitely watching each of you over the years. So it's getting this inside knowledge is always important. I definitely appreciated all of the comments that I've heard today and wanted to check in, just to always listen and see how things develop. And I guess one question that I would ask for panelists, we seem to be struggling with a lot of the same questions that your generation was struggling with or attempting to answer. I guess, what words of encouragement would you give to younger scholars as we sort of navigate this changing world, this racial regression? And so we oftentimes teach about these things knowing that institutions don't change often. And so it becomes a little taxing sometimes to sort of navigate the system. So what encouraging words would you give to sort of younger scholars such as myself?
Well, I'll jump in, Emmett. Thank you for that question. And you like Maya Rocketmore Cummings have a cute dog. Well, I would say the consistency with which these issues have come up in the organization's history tells you that, none of us were able to solve it, but we moved it along, gradually. So, for example, the creation of the archives at the Woodruff AU library took, a decade or more. It took a lot of time. The Race and Democracy in the America project, it took a lot of collaboration over time. As I recall, we were in Norfolk for an NCOBPS meeting, and we had this big dinner with Louisa and and Michael Mitchell and the usual cast of characters involved in that. And people started talking about, we're going to be coming to Bahia and be on the beach and so forth. And people were like, oh, Louisa was, oh, no, you're not. But it did happen. It took another several years, and it's continued over time. So it's sort of like, you got to build something. You got to think about building it. What are the resources the organization has at present? How to build on top of that? How to create a network of people who will work with you, and you can get convinced to join you, and see how to continue, because none of us built anything individually. We built it in collaboration with everyone else, and ideas that we started with, the next president took it up in some way and continued. The other thing I would say is, if you can find some resources in your home institution, it may not be money, it may be students who can work with you. If you have grad students, you have undergrads, to come to the meetings, bring those students with you. My students who came, and I think I drew the most students when I was at Illinois, Mark Sawyer, Lori Frazier, a number of others who brought students with them, and then that became part of their undergraduate education. So those are some ideas to start to respond to you. I'm sure others will have comments as well. And of course, Lori and Mark eventually ended up at UCLA together, and Lori's just announced the creation of a summer Mark Sawyer Summer Institute. So.
Yeah. The most encouraging thing I can say to you is that despite the fact that there's been this continuity of issues over the years and working at trying to resolve them, none of those issues have failed us. NCOBPS has continued its existence and grown and developed. So we have been building something over the years, and that it is worthy and solid is the stability that the organization has maintained over the years. NCOBPS has been in continuous organization, operation. There's been no break in our activity, notwithstanding the fact that we've had these issues of membership and recruitment and communication and funding and all those things. None of those things have destroyed us. Working at them continuously have actually made us stronger. And so, in a certain sort of way, the challenge is to keep on talking about those tricky issues and accumulating knowledge and building the base that sustains you to the future.
Yes, I think that one of the things is that's helped us a lot is we've operated as a team, and not just meeting at NCOBPS once a year or meeting at NCOBPS and APSA, but just maintaining continual contact with each other and stimulating each other, getting ideas from each other, and redefining the possible.
So I'm not on the panel, Emmett, but one of the things that comes across in just, you know, across the generations, I think a lot of younger scholars really need to listen to these sessions. They will be on YouTube so they can know more about the history of NCOBPS and the fact that the issues are the same issues, that those who came before were addressing these issues. So it's like, it's nothing new under the sun. And to understand that it's not about individualism, but it's the collective. And no one person can sustain NCOBPS. It has to be a collective effort. And they need to know that history. So, because I think that history will inform their behavior.
Thank you very much. And Kathy, as you know, this is part of the reason why I lobbied and for the presidential history series. And despite today's audience, we'll continue this as long as they allow me to, you know, and I'm here to work and continue it, because I think it's so important for future generations to be able to hear from the voices. You know, we have lost a number of our voices, and just as unfortunately, I was not able to attend the forum on Dr. Precious yesterday due to some health issues, but I understand that Diane was able to, I guess, to have the young people hear her voice. And yesterday in a later panel that I went to, the founders panel, I think it was, one young woman talked about how important that was. And that's why I think that I'm so grateful that we are recording, you know, these sessions, although I think we're all tired of Zoom, but when we get back face to face, we can continue to record them and make them a part of our legacy and our collection for future generations. So I want to say thank you to all of you. I greatly appreciate the fact that you take time to participate today, and look forward to seeing you next year in person, each and every one of you. Really really miss this personal touch. So Emmett, you guys need to make a decision on soon and let us know where we need to start saving our pennies to go to next month.
We will. I'm praying.
We will probably by May. Hopefully, we'll have that solidified.
Okay. Thank you very much. And there's another session that is starting shortly.
No,
That's not another session today?
I'll let Emmett answer that.
Okay.
So they have listed the inauguration, and that is an error because Tiffany has one more year on her term.
Oh, right. Yeah, I thought so.
You guys were, you know, I was like, am I confused about these terms? And then when you guys started to explain it, it made sense. So I'm not having a plenary, so someone else may be sponsoring one, but I thought that this was it.
Oh, okay. I thought this was it until I saw that inauguration piece. And I
Me,
got
me
confused
too. When they announced it, I called Kathy and on speed dial. Okay, what's going on?
Yeah, when it was announced yesterday, I was like, no, Tiffany has another term, another year. But anyway, okay, so does this mean that we'll see you next year at NCOBPS or in September for those of you who go to the APSA or the, I don't know whether the other meetings of some of them are going
Southern.
on now. Southern is
Southern.
going on soon and
The Midwest,
Midwest.
those are all happening.
So anyway, and so hope to see you in 2023 and hope to see all of you before then. Maybe Martha's Vineyard, huh, Diane?
Yeah. I'm going to send everybody the link to this announcement that Tiffany had sent me about the appointment of an NCOBPS member to UN Committee on People of African Descent. That UN project is really worth all of us knowing about and following. Michael McEdney is the person in question.
Of course, I'll be following up to each of you with an email and requesting that you send me your notes and PowerPoints for the collection. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila.
Take care. Don't hang up, David.
Okay.